Imagine looking up at the moon and realizing it is not just some lifeless celestial rock, but an abandoned, hollowed-out space station built by angels to act as, like, Earth's cosmic plumbing system. Welcome to today's deep dive.
That is certainly, well, it's one way to set the stage for what we are tackling today.
Yeah, we are unpacking a really fascinating, highly unconventional text from 2005. It's by an author named Su Feng, and it's titled The Origin of Life. And I want to be crystal clear with you right out of the gate here. Our goal today is absolutely not to endorse these viewpoints as, scientific fact.
Right.
We aren't here to convince you this is how the universe actually works. Instead, we're impartially exploring this incredibly detailed, highly structured, and frankly, totally surprising worldview that the author presents.
It really functions as an intricate thought experiment. I mean, to really grasp it, we have to temporarily suspend our conventional understanding of physics and biology and cosmology and step into a framework where the mind dictates, well, literally everything.
Exactly. So if you are listening to this and rolling your eyes at the idea of angels engineering the solar system, stick with us, because what is genuinely captivating here isn't necessarily whether it's true, but the airtight internal logic the author builds to justify it.
Yeah, the internal consistency is wild.
It really is. So buckle up. Today we are exploring why a creaking floorboard in your house might actually be an angry carpenter, why the moon is infrastructure, and why your physical body is utterly useless without the software of your soul.
Right, and to understand any of those larger, sweeping cosmic ideas, we have to start at the foundational level. The text completely redefines what a living being actually is.
Yeah.
Without understanding Xu Feng's baseline definition of life, the rest of the text architecture simply won't hold up.
Okay, let's unpack this. The author kicks things off by quoting artificial life theorist Christopher Langton. He says, the essence of life lies not in its substance, but in its form. The text argues that mainstream scientists completely miss the mark because they are obsessively focused on physical material like cells, proteins, DNA.
Yeah, and the author distills this into an ultimate equation for life, which looks, honestly, absurdly simple. It's just 1 + 1 = 1.
Right.
In this metaphysical framework, the first one represents a formless spiritual entity. You call it consciousness, or the mind, or the soul. And the second one is a tangible object, a physical carrier. Only when you merge that formless spiritual entity with a tangible object do you get one life.
Think of the universe in this text like a giant cloud computing network. Your physical body is just a dumb terminal, like a screen and a keyboard. It has no power on its own.
Exactly.
All the actual processing, the memory, the soul is happening off-site on a server somewhere. The text explicitly compares the human body to a person's clothes or a car. It's just an appendage you are wearing.
That analogy captures the mechanism perfectly. The author also uses the analogy of a fax machine to illustrate how a non-material structure travels.
I found that part so helpful for visualizing this. Imagine I send a fax from Harare, Zimbabwe to Washington, D.C. The original paper and the ink, the tangible materials, they never leave my office.
Right, you keep them.
I can throw them in the trash, honestly. But the essence of that document, its form and information, is translated into audio signals. It bounces up to a satellite, beams across the globe, travels down a cable, and is reconstituted by the machine in D.C.
And the mechanics of that transmission are key to the author's argument here. The physical material didn't travel, the structural essence did. The text argues that just as those audio signals have a specific frequency and structure, non-material things like time, space, consciousness, and the soul, they possess complex non-material structures.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the true essence of life is simply that non-material structure possessing a spiritual quality.
Wait, hold on. I have to wrestle with the implications of this for a second. Because if life is just a spiritual signal occupying a physical carrier, does this mean literally anything can be life? Can my coffee cup be alive right now? What about a random stone sitting on the sidewalk?
According to the text's internal logic, emphatically yes. A stone, a tree, a statue, or even a vehicle can be considered life if it possesses spirituality at a given moment in time and space.
But does my coffee cup suddenly have agency? Is it going to start making decisions? Or is it just temporarily housing a soul that is using it as a resting stop?
It's the latter.
Mm-hmm.
The physical object doesn't suddenly become animated like a cartoon character. It just becomes a vessel holding a spiritual frequency.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, when that frequency leaves, the object reverts to being just a heap of clay or metal. The text is very clear that life is a temporary state, dependent entirely on whether the spiritual software is currently running on that specific hardware.
So if the software dictates the state of being alive, what happens to humans when the software goes offline. Because the author claims that a human being in a vegetative state, or even someone who is just sleeping and dreaming, is temporarily not alive.
Right, it's more like a paused state. In this framework, during sleep or a coma, the non-material structure, the soul, has temporarily roamed into what the author terms a space tunnel.
A space tunnel.
Yeah, the biological engine of the body might be idling. The heart is beating, blood is pumping, but the driver has left the vehicle. Only when the soul returns from that space tunnel to the flesh does the person regain the status of being life.
That completely decouples the mind from the matter. And if we accept the author's premise that a soul operates a biological body like software, the terrifying next logical step is, well, what happens when that software is manipulated? Like, what happens when the soul is convinced the hardware is failing?
That is where the text moves from theoretical philosophy into some wildly unconventional medical and historical anecdotes. The foundational rule the author establishes is that a physical body only dies after the consciousness collapses. The soul must wave the white flag first.
Yeah, there is this incredibly bizarre example cited from the SARS outbreak in China. Government agents were investigating restaurants to track down the source of the virus, and they followed an animal trader. This trader buys a batch of snakes, and while helping the cook prepare them, he decapitates the snakes. Hours later, after the snake is entirely severed and biologically dead by our standards, the trader is cleaning up. The severed head of the snake suddenly bites his finger, permanently disabling it.
Right, and from a conventional biological standpoint, we label that a residual nervous system reflex. The muscles are just firing off stored energy. But the text frames the mechanism entirely differently.
The author argues that the dead snake could take revenge because its consciousness, its psychological activity, remained intact within that severed head. The soul hadn't accepted death yet, so it was still operating the hardware.
Exactly. And we see that same mechanism mirrored in a mythological story the author analyzes regarding Prime Minister Big An. According to the legend, Big An's heart was violently cut out of his chest.
Ace!
Yeah. Yet he didn't die immediately. He walked through town, completely functional, because his non-material structure, his consciousness, was still firmly attached to his physical form.
He is just strolling through the market entirely heartless until he runs into a vegetable seller.
Right. The vegetable seller tells him vegetables without hearts can live, but humans without hearts must die.
Wow.
It was only upon processing that specific conceptual boundary, upon hearing those words and fundamentally believing them, that his thinking was sealed off. His soul was tricked into acknowledging that his hardware was broken. It detached, and he collapsed dead on the spot.
It is essentially a fatal placebo effect. And the text backs this up with some really harrowing psychological examples. There's the dark experiment of the blindfolded prisoner sentenced to death.
Oh, that one is intense.
Yeah, so the executioners pretend to slit his wrist with a dull blade, and then they set up a bucket of dripping water nearby. The prisoner hears the dripping, fundamentally believes it is his own blood draining away, and as the dripping sound slowly stops, the prisoner dies.
And he didn't shed a single drop of blood.
Not a single drop.
He died of conventional thinking. His psychological defense line collapsed, causing his non-material structure to abandon the body. And the author boldly applies this exact logic to modern terminal illness. The text claims that diseases like cancer or SARS do not physically kill you. What they actually do is destroy your psychological fortitude.
There is a story in the text about a hospital mix-up that perfectly illustrates this, actually. Two patients have their medical reports swapped. One man is perfectly healthy, but he sneaks a look at the file with his name on it, and it reads terminal cancer. He instantly feels dizzy, breaks into a cold sweat, completely collapses, and basically begins to die of fright.
Meanwhile, the patient who actually had the terminal cancer sees the report declaring him perfectly healthy. He sits up, declares his doctors are incompetent, grabs his belongings, and cheerfully walks out of the hospital feeling fantastic.
That's incredible.
Yeah, his soul was given permission to thrive.
It is a profound assertion, that we die because our souls give up. But this brings us to a really fascinating crossroads. If a soul can exist independently of a human body, and if it can detach because of severe trauma or profound anger, where does it go?
That question weaponizes the 1 + 1 = 1 equation. The author argues that souls do not simply vanish into the ether when they are wronged. They seek out new physical carriers. They get attached to plants, rocks, storms, and remarkably human-made machines.
Machines.
Yeah. If a soul is violently aggrieved, it uses that new carrier to seek retribution.
Which brings us to the story of the killing monster. This part of the text reads like a supernatural thriller. It describes a six-seat German car with a literal body count. Over its lifespan, this specific vehicle killed 18 people and injured 7.
And the victims were heavily concentrated around pivotal historical events, too.
Exactly. The very first incident was in June 1914. This was the car carrying the Austrian crown prince and his wife when they were assassinated. So this specific machine is credited with sparking the outbreak of the Great World War.
Yeah.
Then it kills a queen, it kills a general commander. It crashes and breaks the backbone of a head of state, permanently crippling him. It cycles through various owners, a jeweler, a racer, a farmer, and none of them escape tragedy. Finally, the car is blown to pieces by an Allied bomber in World War II. I'm really trying to wrap my head around the author's logic here. How does a soul operate a combustion engine to cause bad luck?
Well, instead of looking at it as an improbable string of mechanical failures, Savenk infers that the artisan who originally manufactured the car was deeply ill-treated or exploited during its creation. His indignant soul became fundamentally bound to the machine's structure.
So he haunted the car?
Yes. After his biological death, his spirit fostered this century-spanning series of tragedies, actively manipulating the car's mechanics and the decisions of its drivers to comfort his injured spirit.
A haunted car seeking geopolitical revenge. It sounds absurd until you see how the author applies the same logic to natural phenomena, like take lightning strikes. Mainstream science explains lightning as the discharge of atmospheric electricity seeking the path of least resistance.
Right.
The author counters that lightning is frequently a targeted vendetta by a spiritual entity.
And the text provides highly specific examples to support this. It cites a courtyard where a man was struck dead by lightning in 1899. 30 years later, his son is killed by lightning in the exact same spot. 20 years after that, in 1949, his grandson is struck dead. That is 3 generations of a single family in the same courtyard, all eliminated by lightning.
And then there is the Canadian major. In 1918, he is struck by lightning and survives. 6 years later, he is struck again and becomes partially paralyzed. 6 years after that, struck a third time and fully paralyzed.
Unbelievable.
He finally passes away naturally, and 2 years later, lightning strikes his tomb and blasts it to pieces.
Right, because a random discharge of static electricity does not hold a grudge across decades. A non-material structure with a psychological motive does. The author is reading deep intention into statistical anomalies.
And this framework scales all the way down to everyday life. If you were listening to this, have you ever been sitting in your house late at night and you hear the wooden floorboards or the walls let out this loud, sudden creak?
We are universally taught that is thermal contraction. The ambient temperature drops, the moisture in the wood changes, and the structure settles.
But the author claims that is a complete misread of the situation. It is not thermal contraction at all. Those creaks are the indignant souls of the carpenters who built the house. They were underpaid, rushed, or ill-treated during construction, and their souls are returning to the structure to vocally express their enduring anger.
The author is effectively creating a unified theory of supernatural vengeance. Every form of unevenness in history, whether it's a creaking house, a rebellion, an earthquake, or a targeted lightning strike, is the direct mechanical result of indignated souls interacting with physical carriers.
The most famous example the text provides for this is the Egyptian pyramids and the curse of the pharaohs.
Yeah, the text observes that over 40 archaeologists died sudden, mysterious deaths after disturbing those tombs, including Professor Dormethrin, the curator of the Cairo Museum, and an archaeologist named Emery, who became inexplicably paralyzed.
And the mechanism for this?
It's straightforward. The pharaohs believed deeply in their own physical resurrection. Because of that rigid belief, their non-material structures never left their mummified bodies. They're literally still there, on guard duty, actively punishing anyone who breaches their resting place.
Okay, so we have established how the author views the players on the board. Souls are the software, physical bodies and cars and houses are the hardware, and angry software can cause massive localized damage.
Right.
But who built the board? If this is how life operates, how is the earthly stage constructed in the first place?
This is where the text requires us to completely throw out the modern scientific playbook, the Big Bang Theory, Darwinian evolution. The author outright rejects them.
The cosmic origin story presented here is breathtaking in its scale. The text asserts that the solar system did not coalesce by chance from a swirling nebula. It was painstakingly, artificially arranged by the greatest creator about 4.5 billion years ago. And the wildest part is the timeline, honestly.
Yeah.
The author insists the Earth was formed before the sun.
The mechanism described for the Earth's creation is almost culinary. The text explains that black holes are not magnetic vortices or collapsed stars with infinite gravity. Rather, they are batches of high-energy matter described as covered dough.
Covered dough.
Yeah, and the creator pinched off a specific piece of that black hole dough to form the Earth. The sun was then manufactured and moved into position later, and the other planets were strategically placed simply to stabilize the Earth's rotation.
So the entire solar system is basically a bespoke life support system designed exclusively to foster this one planet. But the creator didn't handle the localized terraforming alone. The text introduces super celestial beings, or angels, who were dispatched to design the biosphere.
And they required physical infrastructure to execute this mandate.
Right, and this is where I was genuinely struggling to connect the dots. The text claims these angels built massive laboratories shaped like pyramids, but not in Egypt. They built them deep underwater, along the 30-degree north and south latitudes in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The purpose of these underwater pyramids was to gather solar energy and genetically design life. But if these beings are advanced enough to build a planet from black hole dough, why on earth do they need physical stone pyramids underwater to make plants? It just feels incredibly inefficient.
Well, the author's logic relies on geometric and energetic resonance. In many metaphysical frameworks, the 30-degree latitudes are viewed as planetary nodal lines, sweet spots in the Earth's energetic grid. The pyramids supposedly acted as massive amplifiers or prisms, capturing refracted solar radiation through the water to incubate complex biological designs safely away from surface radiation. It was a billion-year, highly controlled engineering project.
Okay, but once they started populating the continents with these engineered animals and plants, they encountered a massive logistical problem. They needed a global weather system to pull water inland. They needed tides, wind, and rain to keep the biological hardware functioning.
And their solution was to construct an orbital machine.
They open a mine. The text claims these supercelestial beings literally mined the Earth's metals and constructed the moon as an artificial, hollow space station. They put it in orbit to use its gravitational drag to pull the oceans back and forth.
The moon is not a natural satellite in this view. It is a massive water pump. It is cosmic plumbing installed to generate weather patterns.
That is just astonishing. But what happened to the super advanced underwater pyramid labs once the planet was fully operational?
Well, the text suggests that the Earth became such a paradise that the angels grew attached to it and didn't want to leave. However, to prevent jealousy and conflict with other cosmic beings across the universe, they were forced to evacuate. To completely hide their proprietary secrets of biological creation, they deliberately dropped the pyramid laboratories deep into the ocean floor's crust.
And the text explicitly links this act of sabotage to the sinking of the continent of Atlantis. Atlantis was essentially the collateral damage of angels destroying their own lab equipment.
It ties up several mythological loose ends at once. And this highly controlled, laboratory-based creation narrative is exactly why the author vehemently rejects Darwinian evolution.
Yeah, the text uses a very practical, mechanical analogy to dispute evolution. It points out that humans invented unicycles, bicycles, cars, and trucks. They share undeniable visual and structural commonalities. They all use wheels, axles, and steering mechanisms.
Right.
But a unicycle will never naturally, through random mutation, evolve into a 10-ton truck.
And the author maps that exact logic onto biology. A monkey shares commonalities with a human because they share a designer, but a monkey will never evolve into a human. A snail will never evolve into cattle. They were bespoke creations, designed separately in an underwater pyramid using shared biological components. In this universe, nothing is random. Everything is deeply intentional.
So what does this all mean for us? We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with this fundamental redefinition of life as a temporary hybrid of a formless spiritual entity and a physical carrier.
Yeah, we really did.
We explored how the mind's belief can literally dictate biological life and death, how angry spiritual software haunts cars and floorboards, and we zoomed all the way out to an Earth engineered from black hole dough by angels who built the moon as a water pump.
When you step back and look at the broader implications of Xiufeng's The Origin of Life, regardless of your personal scientific or religious beliefs, it offers a stunningly intricate alternative reality.
Totally.
It demands that we question the hard, comfortable boundaries we draw between biology, psychology, and metaphysics. It challenges the arrogance of assuming that what we can currently measure with our scientific instruments is the absolute limit of existence. It places the power of the mind, the invisible software, at the absolute center of reality, dictating the behavior of all physical hardware.
And speaking of the immense power of the mind, I want to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative thought from the text, something to mull over. The author mentions that because the spiritual entity, the soul, is entirely non material, it is fundamentally weightless. The text compares the ancient mythological concept of mounting the clouds and riding the mist to modern astronauts floating effortlessly in space.
Hmm.
The author suggests that if you could truly unlock the secrets of your own soul, if you could completely shift your consciousness away from your worldly material ties, your physical weight could theoretically become as light as a feather.
Wow.
So if consciousness is truly weightless, and if our minds entirely dictate the reality of our physical hardware, sorry, no, wait, if our minds completely dictate the reality of our hardware, could altering our state of mind literally change how we interact with gravity? Just something to think about the next time you step on a scale.